Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. It's great to see you all tuning in. You know, we sit around, we talk, we share, but sometimes some questions, well, they just hang in the air, don't they? Especially those really direct ones. The kind that make you shift in your seat a little. We've all been there wondering what the other side is thinking. So today we're pulling back the curtain, maybe even yanking it off the rod entirely because we're about to get into it. Today, we're diving into some of the most explicit questions men have been asked. And when I say explicit, I mean the kind of questions that usually only come up after a few too many drinks, or maybe in those anonymous internet forums where everyone's suddenly a truth teller. We've gathered the queries, the eyebrow raisers, the ones women are genuinely curious about, and we're putting them to the test. Think of it as a public service, really. We're doing the awkward asking so you don't have to, or maybe so you can get some validation for the questions you've always wanted to ask. You won't believe some of their answers. Seriously, we're talking about a roller coaster of responses, some hilarious, some surprisingly honest, and some that will just make you go, wait, what? So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, because things are about to get very interesting, very real, and probably a little bit TMI. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? Let's get into it, because the vault is open and the secrets are coming out. All right, first up, a question that can make even the most confident guy blush a little. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you in bed? Oh boy, where do we even start with this one? It's like a rite of passage, isn't it? That moment when everything is supposed to be smooth and romantic, maybe even a little steamy. And then, bam! Something goes spectacularly, hilariously wrong. It could be a sudden noise, a misplaced limb, or maybe the cat decides it's the perfect time to jump on the bed. We've all got a story, or at least know someone who does. You know, these aren't the stories that make it into the romance novels, that's for sure. These are the behind-the-scenes bloopers, the outtakes of our love lives. I heard one story about a guy who, in a moment of passion, accidentally headbutted his partner, giving her a small shiner. Talk about making an impact, right? Not exactly the kind of seeing stars moment anyone hopes for. Then there's the classic, the bed collapsing. It sounds like something out of a sitcom, but apparently it happens more often than you'd think. Imagine the noise, the confusion, the sudden drop. It's hard to recover your cool after that. And let's not forget the unexpected bodily functions. Nobody wants to talk about it, but hey, we're being blunt here. A rogue sneeze at an inopportune moment, a leg cramp that makes you yelp like you've seen a ghost, or maybe even, dare I say it, an ill-timed toot. These are the moments that test a relationship, or at least your ability to laugh it off. It's like your body just decides, you know what would be funny right now, and then proceeds to sabotage any semblance of suave you were trying to project. It's humbling, to say the least. Then there are the verbal fumbles. You're trying to say something romantic, something smooth, and what comes out is just gibberish. Or worse, you call someone by the wrong name. That's a classic, isn't it? The verbal equivalent of tripping on a completely flat surface. It's amazing how quickly a mood can be shattered by one wrong word. You try to play it off, but the damage is done. The air is thick with awkwardness, and you're just wishing the floor would swallow you whole. It's a universal experience, I think, that moment of pure, unadulterated foot-in-mouth disease. But you know what? As embarrassing as these moments are, they're also incredibly human. They remind us that nobody's perfect, and sometimes the best way to handle it is just to laugh. If you can laugh together about the time the dog ran off with your underwear, or when you accidentally set off the smoke alarm trying to light candles, well, maybe that's a sign of a pretty good connection. These stories, while cringeworthy at the time, often become the legendary tales you share later. They add character, a little bit of spice to the narrative of our lives. Next up, we're tackling a question that's probably caused more awkward silences than a bad magic trick. Have you ever lied about your number of sexual partners? Ah, the infamous number. It's like this weird, unwritten scorecard that some people seem to carry around. Why is it such a big deal? Is it ego? Is it insecurity? Is it just plain old bad math? I mean, who's really keeping a detailed spreadsheet unless you're some kind of sexual accountant? Yes, carry the one. A brief encounter in 0 night. Well, let's be honest. There's a lot of pressure from all sides. Some guys might inflate the number because they think it makes them sound more experienced, more desirable, like a Casanova of the cul-de-sac. It's that weird bravado, trying to live up to some kind of fictional stud persona. Then you have guys on the other end of the spectrum who might downplay it, worrying that a higher number could be seen as promiscuous or make their current partner uncomfortable. It's a delicate dance, trying to guess what the right answer is, when really the only right answer should be the truth, or perhaps none of your business. And why do people ask this question anyway? What are they hoping to learn? Is it a compatibility test, a background check? Sometimes it feels like you're applying for a job you didn't even know you wanted. References available upon request? It's a strange ritual. I think a lot of the time it comes from a place of insecurity on both sides. The asker might be trying to gauge where they stand or compare themselves, and the answerer is trying to manage perceptions. It's a minefield, really. The reasons for fudging the numbers are probably as varied as the numbers themselves. Maybe it was a long time ago and the details are fuzzy. Maybe they're embarrassed by a low number or a high one. Maybe they just panic and blurt out the first thing that comes to mind, like when a cop asks if you know why they pulled you over. Was I enjoying my music too loudly, officer? It's a defense mechanism, a way to avoid potential judgment, even if that judgment is entirely in their own head. Ultimately, does the number really matter as much as people think it does? Or is it more about honesty and trust in the present moment? If someone feels the need to lie about something like that, it might say more about their comfort level or their perception of the relationship than the actual digit itself. Perhaps the better question is, are you happy and healthy, or do you know how to load a dishwasher correctly? Now, important information, but the number, it's often just a distraction, a piece of trivia that gets way more attention than it deserves. All right, let's switch gears a bit. This one's about what's your biggest turn-off? Everyone has them, those little or big things that can just douse the flames of passion faster than a bucket of ice water. It's like 1 minute everything's great, the mood is set, and then wham! Someone says or does that, and it's like hitting a romantic emergency brake. The screeching halt is almost audible. What are these mysterious passion killers for men? For a lot of guys, a major turn-off can be a lack of enthusiasm or engagement. You know, when it feels like you're the only one putting in the effort, or like the other person is mentally making a grocery list. It's hard to feel connected when your partner seems completely disinterested. It's like trying to have a rally with someone who won't hit the tennis ball back. You're just out there serving into the void. That feeling of being the only one invested can be a real mood killer, making you wonder if you're even in the same room, let alone the same moment. And then there are the more, shall we say, turn-offs. This one seems pretty universal, but it's worth mentioning. Bad breath, noticeable body odor that isn't the "I just worked out and I'm a rugged beast" kind, but more the "did you shower this week" variety. These things can be a significant barrier. It's hard to get close and intimate when you're trying not to recoil. It might sound superficial to some, but basic cleanliness is often a fundamental part of attraction and comfort for many people, men included. It's not about being perfect, just about showing a bit of care. Another common one is negativity or constant complaining, especially in moments that are supposed to be intimate or romantic. If someone is always finding fault, criticizing, or just generally bringing a dark cloud into the bedroom, it's tough to maintain a positive and passionate atmosphere. It's like trying to light a candle in a wind tunnel. That kind of energy can be incredibly draining and make a guy feel like he can't do anything right, which is definitely not conducive to romance or connection. A little optimism, or at least a moratorium on complaints, can go a long way, and sometimes it's about pressure or unrealistic expectations. Feeling like you have to perform or live up to some kind of movie-inspired ideal can be a huge turn-off. It takes the spontaneity and fun out of it and turns it into a stressful audition. Men, just like anyone, want to feel accepted for who they are, not like they're constantly being evaluated against some impossible standard. Authenticity and genuine connection are usually far more attractive than a forced attempt at perfection. When it feels like a checklist is being ticked off, the magic just sort of evaporates. This next question might surprise some people, because it's often associated more with women, but here it is. Have you ever faked an orgasm? Yep, it happens. It's not just a plot point in a romantic comedy. Some men do, on occasion, put on a performance worthy of a small local theatre award. But why? What's the motivation behind pretending you've reached the summit when you're still stuck at base camp with a faulty compass? It seems counterintuitive, right? One of the main reasons, and it's a bit sad really, is to avoid hurting their partner's feelings. If things have been going on for a while and a guy senses his partner is getting tired or maybe feeling self-conscious about how long it's taking, he might fake it to sort of end the scene on a perceived high note. It's like, okay, she seems like she's done. I don't want her to feel bad, so cue the fireworks. It's a misguided attempt at kindness, perhaps, born out of a desire to protect the other person's ego, even if it means sacrificing his own genuine experience. Another reason can be pressure, either self-imposed or perceived. Men are often saddled with this stereotype of being constantly ready and able to perform and to always finish. If for whatever reason it's just not happening, maybe they're tired, stressed, not in the mood, or things just aren't clicking, faking it can seem like an easier way out than admitting it's not working for me right now. It's tied into those outdated notions of masculinity where vulnerability isn't always seen as a strength. So, instead of a conversation, you get a performance. Sometimes it's just about wanting it to be over. Maybe they're not enjoying themselves, maybe they're distracted, or maybe they just really need to get some sleep because they have an early start. It sounds blunt, but it's a reality. In these cases, faking it is less about the partner and more about their own desire to conclude the activity. It's like fast-forwarding through the credits of a movie you didn't particularly enjoy, but felt obligated to watch until the end. Not ideal, certainly not fair to anyone involved, but it happens. And let's not forget the influence of, shall we say, where every encounter is apparently mind-blowing and ends with a spectacular finish for everyone involved every single time. This can create unrealistic expectations for real-life intimacy. If a guy feels he's not living up to that impossible standard, he might resort to faking it to match the script he's seen played out so many times. Ultimately, faking it, for men or women, usually points to a communication breakdown or underlying insecurities that would be better addressed with honesty, even if it's a little awkward at first. Okay, things might get a little weird with this one. What's the weirdest thing you've ever been asked to do in bed? This is where we venture off the beaten path into the land of unique preferences and sometimes downright bizarre suggestions. Everyone's definition of weird is different, of course. What one person finds adventurous, another might find utterly baffling. But I'm sure some of the answers to this one would raise a few eyebrows and probably a few chuckles too. You hear stories, right? People have all sorts of specific scenarios or items they want to incorporate. I recall one guy mentioning he was asked to wear a full mascot costume. Not just the head, the whole furry, probably very warm suit. Imagine trying to be intimate while dressed as a giant squirrel. The logistics alone are mind-boggling. Where do you even buy a mascot costume on short notice, and how do you keep a straight face? It's the kind of request that makes you wonder about the backstory. Then there are the requests that involve props, and not just the kind you might buy from a specialty store. We're talking household items, food items, for example. While some might find the idea of incorporating whipped cream or chocolate sauce playful, things can get strange when someone suggests, say, a bowl of lukewarm oatmeal, or perhaps a specific type of breakfast cereal. You start to wonder if you're in a bedroom or a very confused episode of a cooking show. It's all about personal taste, I guess, but some tastes are definitely more acquired than others. Sometimes the weirdness isn't about objects, but about roles or scenarios, being asked to act out a scene from a very niche movie, or to pretend to be a historical figure with a very specific accent and set of grievances. It's like, okay, I can try to be romantic, but I'm not sure I can convincingly channel a disgruntled 18th century tax collector, while also, being intimate. It requires a level of improvisational acting skill that most of us simply do not possess, especially in the heat of the moment. And of course, there are the requests that are just out there. Things that make you pause and think, did I hear that correctly? Maybe it involves a strange location, an unusual combination of activities, or a level of acrobatics that would challenge a Cirque du Soleil performer. The key thing here, for any guy, is navigating these requests. Do you try to be accommodating? Do you politely decline? Do you suggest a slightly less weird alternative? It's a delicate balance between being open-minded and not ending up in a situation that's just too far outside your comfort zone, or frankly, just too odd to take seriously. Let's talk about something that's incredibly prevalent, but often discussed in hushed tones or with a bit of a smirk. Do you watch adult content? If so, how often? This is a big one. For many men, it's a part of their lives, whether occasionally or more regularly. It's like the unacknowledged roommate in many relationships. Everyone knows it's there, but no one's quite sure how to talk about it, or if they even should. The internet has made it more accessible than ever, a whole universe of it just a few clicks away. The reasons men watch it are varied. For some, it's simply a way to unwind, a form of escapism, or a private way to explore their sexuality without any pressure or real-world complications. It's a readily available stimulus. For others, it might be about curiosity, seeing things they might not encounter in their everyday lives. And yes, for many, it's a straightforward tool for self-pleasure. It's not always some deep, dark secret, but often just a part of how they engage with their own sexuality in private. The how often part is where things can get tricky, and where opinions and judgments often come into play. What's normal? What's too much? There's no universal answer, and it can depend heavily on individual habits, relationship dynamics, and personal beliefs. Some guys might watch it daily, others weekly, some only sporadically when the mood strikes, and some not at all. The frequency itself isn't necessarily the issue, but rather how it impacts their life, their relationships, and their perception of real-world intimacy. That's where the conversation usually gets more nuanced. There's also the concern about how adult content might affect expectations in real relationships. The performances in these videos are often just that, performances. They're not always representative of realistic sexual encounters, realistic bodies, or realistic emotional connections. If someone is consuming a lot of it, there's a potential risk that it could skew their view of what sex is or should be like with a real partner, leading to disappointment or unrealistic demands. This is a common point of discussion and concern for many couples. Ultimately, like many things, the impact of adult content on men and their partners seems to come down to moderation, communication, and honesty. Is it being used as a supplement or a replacement for real intimacy? Is it causing issues in the relationship? Is it creating unrealistic expectations? These are the more important questions than just do you watch it, and how often. Having an open and non-judgmental conversation about it, if it's a concern, is probably more productive than making assumptions or letting it be the elephant in the room or, on the laptop screen. Now, for a topic that really challenges traditional views on love and commitment, what's your opinion on open relationships? This isn't your grandma's dating advice, that's for sure. The idea of having a primary partner, but also being free to pursue romantic or sexual connections with other people. It's a concept that fascinates some, confuses others, and outright horrifies a few. What do guys generally think about this? Is it a utopian ideal of freedom and honesty, or a recipe for jealousy and heartbreak? For some men, the idea of an open relationship might sound appealing on the surface. The thought of variety, new experiences, less restriction, it can seem like the best of both worlds, especially if they feel that monogamy can sometimes be challenging, or that human beings aren't necessarily wired for strict lifelong pairing with one person. They might see it as a more honest way to acknowledge desires that might otherwise lead to cheating or resentment in a closed relationship. It's about transparency, or so the theory goes. However, the reality of an open relationship is often far more complex than the fantasy. It requires an incredible amount of communication, trust, and clearly defined boundaries. And let's be honest, jealousy is a powerful emotion. Even if you intellectually agree to the arrangement, seeing your partner with someone else, or them knowing you're with someone else, can stir up some pretty intense feelings. It takes a very secure individual and a very strong foundational relationship to navigate those waters successfully. It's not just about the physical, it's about the emotional fallout. Many guys, I suspect, while perhaps entertaining the thought experiment, would find the practical application pretty daunting. The logistics alone, managing multiple relationships, schedules, emotional needs. It sounds exhausting, like having multiple full-time jobs with very demanding bosses. And then there's the constant negotiation of rules. What's allowed? What's off limits? Who can you see? Where can you see them? It can turn into a very complicated rule book that needs constant updates and amendments. Romance by committee, almost. And of course, there's the societal aspect. Open relationships are still not the norm, and there can be a lot of judgment or misunderstanding from friends, family, and the wider community. This can add another layer of stress to an already complex arrangement. Ultimately, while some men might be curious or even theoretically open to the idea, I think for many the perceived benefits are often outweighed by the potential for emotional turmoil, jealousy, and the sheer hard work involved in making it function healthily for everyone involved. It's definitely not for the faint of heart or the poor communicators. This next one treads into tricky, potentially friendship-ending territory. Have you ever had a crush on a friend's partner? Oof, this is the stuff of awkward silences at group dinners and the quiet internal "don't go there" alarms. It's a complicated situation because it mixes loyalty to a friend with an undeniable and often unwanted attraction. It's like your brain and your heart are in a cage match, and your sense of decency is the referee trying desperately to stop the fight. It happens, right? You can't always control who you're attracted to. Your friend starts dating someone new, that they bring them around, and suddenly you find yourself thinking, wow, they're really great. Maybe a little great. It's not something anyone actively seeks out. It's usually an unwelcome surprise, a little gremlin of attraction that pops up and starts making things uncomfortable. The immediate next thought is usually, no, absolutely not. Bad brain. But the feeling can linger. The ethical dilemma here is huge. Acting on such a crush is almost universally seen as a massive betrayal of friendship, a line you just don't cross. So, for most guys, if this feeling arises, it's immediately filed under things to aggressively ignore and hope they go away. It becomes about managing your own feelings, creating some distance if necessary, and focusing on the importance of the friendship. It's about being a good mate, even if your subconscious has thrown you a curveball. It can lead to some pretty awkward internal monologues and behaviors. Maybe you find yourself being overly formal with the friend's partner, or avoiding one-on-one conversations, or overcompensating by being enthusiastic about their relationship. It's like trying to act natural when you're hiding a beach ball under your shirt. Everyone can tell something's a bit off, even if they can't quite put their finger on it. The guilt and the fear of being discovered can be pretty intense. Ultimately, for most decent guys, the friendship will almost always take precedence. The crush, however strong, gets compartmentalized or fades over time, hopefully. It's a testament to the strength of platonic bonds. But it's definitely a situation that tests your character and your ability to keep your impulses in check. It's one of those unspoken rules of the bro code, or just human decency, really. Your friend's partner is off limits, end of story, even if they laugh at all your jokes. Let's lighten the mood with something a bit more heartwarming, though potentially still a little bit awkward. What's the most romantic thing you've ever done? Romance. For some guys, this word conjures images of serenades under balconies and rose petals strewn everywhere. For others, it means remembering to take out the trash without being asked. The spectrum is wide, my friends. But most guys have at least to pull off a romantic gesture at some point. Sometimes the most romantic thing isn't about grand, expensive gestures. It's about thoughtfulness and effort. I heard about a guy who knew his girlfriend was obsessed with a very specific, hard-to-find childhood candy. He spent weeks, literally weeks, scouring online forums and specialty stores, finally importing a small batch from another country just to surprise her. It wasn't a diamond necklace, but the sheer dedication and the fact he remembered such a small detail, that's incredibly romantic. It shows you're listening, you're paying attention. Then you have the guys who go for the classic movie-inspired moments, the surprise trip, the meticulously planned proposal in a scenic location, the dinner cooked from scratch, even though their culinary skills usually peak at microwaving leftovers. These efforts, even if they don't go perfectly smoothly, maybe the souffle collapses or it rains during the picnic, are romantic because of the intention behind them. It's the A for effort school of romance, and honestly, the effort often counts for more than the flawless execution. And let's not forget the everyday romance, the small things that often mean the most. Bringing coffee in bed, leaving a little note, giving a supportive hug after a tough day, or just genuinely listening when your partner needs to talk. These might not make for dramatic movie scenes, but they build a foundation of love and care that's incredibly romantic in its own quiet way. It's the consistent, steady drumbeat of affection, rather than the occasional cymbal crash. That sustained effort is a language of love all its own. Of course, sometimes a guy's attempt at romance can be endearingly clumsy. The song he wrote that has slightly off-key lyrics, the handmade gift that looks a bit like a kindergarten art project, the spontaneous dance in the living room that's more awkward shuffle than Fred Astaire. But there's a charm in that, isn't there? It's vulnerable, it's genuine, and it's often hilarious in the best possible way. The most romantic thing is often just showing you care in whatever unique, quirky, or even slightly disastrous way you know how. For our final question, we're getting deep. This one requires a bit of vulnerability. What's your biggest insecurity? This isn't always an easy thing for men to talk about. There's often this societal pressure to be strong, stoic, to have it all figured out, like some kind of emotional action hero who never doubts himself. But the truth is, underneath the surface, everyone has things that make them feel a bit shaky, a bit unsure. And men are no exception. A common insecurity for many men revolves around providing not just financially, but emotionally, being a good partner, a good father, a good friend. The fear of not measuring up, of letting people down, can be a heavy weight. It's tied to that traditional provider role, but it's also deeper than that. It's about wanting to be reliable, to be someone others can count on, and worrying that you might fall short of those expectations, especially the ones you place on yourself. This can manifest as working too hard, or being afraid to show weakness. Physical appearance is another big one, despite stereotypes that it's more of a female concern. Men worry about hair loss, about their weight, too much or too little, about not being muscular enough or tall enough. The media bombards everyone with images of ideal bodies, and men can feel that pressure just as acutely. It might not always be voiced, but that quiet comparison, that glance in the mirror focusing on perceived flaws, it's there. It's the feeling of not quite matching up to some arbitrary standard of attractiveness. Then there's the fear of failure in career, in relationships, in life goals. This can be a huge source of insecurity. The idea of not achieving what you set out to do, of being seen as unsuccessful, can be terrifying. It's often linked to self-worth. If I don't succeed at this, what does that say about me? This pressure can lead to a reluctance to take risks or an intense fear of making mistakes, because mistakes are seen as confirmation of inadequacy rather than opportunities for growth. And perhaps one of the biggest, though often least discussed, insecurities is the fear of not being loved or accepted for who you truly are. The fear that if people saw the real you with all your flaws and vulnerabilities, they wouldn't stick around. This can lead to putting up walls, wearing a mask, or trying to be the person you think others want you to be. It takes a lot of courage to be truly authentic, and the insecurity that you might not be enough as you are is a profound one that many men grapple with, often silently. And there you have it, folks. We've waded through the awkward, the funny, the surprisingly deep, and the just plain weird. Thanks for watching, everyone. It's been quite a journey into the male psyche, or at least a peek behind the curtain at some of the things guys think about, worry about, and occasionally get very embarrassed about. Hopefully it sparked some thoughts, maybe a few laughs, and perhaps even some understanding. It's clear that when you ask blunt questions, you get some pretty blunt and often very human answers. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content. We love hearing from you, and your engagement really helps the channel grow. Plus, we're always curious to know what topics you want us to dive into next. Maybe we'll flip the script and have women answer men's blunt questions. The possibilities are endless, and as long as you're watching, we'll keep asking the questions that everyone's thinking, but maybe not saying out loud. Let us know in the comments what you think about these questions and answers. Which response surprised you the most? Which one did you find the most relatable? Do you have any questions of your own you'd like to see tackled in a future video? We read all your comments, so don't be shy. Until next time, stay curious, keep talking, and try not to wear any mascot costumes in bed, unless, that's your thing. No judgment here.